In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where alien empires rise and fall like distant stars, humanity was considered nothing more than a curious footnote, a young species barely worthy of notice. That perception changed forever when Captain Marcus Chen, a simple cargo hauler from Earth, found himself standing before the most powerful ruler in known space. The Zephyrian Empress, whose word could obliterate entire star systems, had just placed the life of her most precious treasure, her granddaughter, into the hands of a human. "Your species may be young," she said, her ancient eyes gleaming with desperate hope, "but you possess something we have lost through millennia of civilization, the primitive instinct to protect what matters, no matter the cost." What followed would shake the foundations of galactic society and prove that sometimes, the most dangerous force in the universe isn't advanced technology or ancient wisdom, it's a human who has given their word. Captain Marcus Chen had been hauling cargo across the Outer Rim territories for 12 years, and, in all that time, he had never received a message marked with the golden seal of the Zephyrian Empire. The holographic display flickered to life in his cramped cockpit aboard the merchant vessel Earthbound, casting strange shadows across the weathered controls as an impossibly elegant figure materialized before him. The messenger was tall and graceful, with the characteristic crystalline skin of the Zephyrians that seemed to capture and reflect light like living diamond. Her voice carried the musical quality that made their species natural diplomats, though there was an urgency beneath the melodic tones that made Marcus sit up straighter in his pilot's chair. "Captain Chen of the vessel Earthbound, you are hereby summoned to appear before Her Imperial Majesty, Empress Valen the Eternal, Sovereign of 7 galaxies and Protector of 1,000 worlds. Your immediate compliance is requested at the Palace of Infinite Stars. A navigation beacon has been transmitted to your vessel." Marcus blinked at the hologram, wondering if someone was playing an elaborate prank on him. He was a cargo hauler, not a diplomat or military officer. His ship was a converted mining vessel that had seen better decades, held together by determination, spare parts, and what his engineer laughingly called aggressive maintenance. The idea that the most powerful ruler in known space wanted to see him personally was absurd. "There must be some mistake," he said to the empty cockpit after the message ended. "I'm nobody special." But the navigation beacon was real enough, and when Marcus tried to alter course away from the coordinates, his ship's systems gently but firmly overrode his commands. Whatever the Empress wanted, she was going to get it. The journey to the Palace of Infinite Stars took 3 days through hyperspace, during which Marcus had plenty of time to worry about what he might have done wrong. His cargo manifest was clean, his shipping licenses were up to date, and he had never so much as littered on an Imperial world. By the time his ship dropped out of hyperspace near the massive space station that served as the mobile capital of the Zephyrian Empire, his nerves were stretched taut. The Palace of Infinite Stars lived up to its name. It was less a space station and more a small artificial world, its surface covered in towering spires that seemed to be carved from single pieces of crystal. Each tower caught the light from nearby stars and refracted it into brilliant displays of color that painted the void in sheets of rainbow fire. Marcus had seen images of the palace before, but seeing it in person left him speechless. A squadron of sleek Zephyrian interceptors escorted his battered cargo ship to a docking bay that was larger than some cities Marcus had visited. As the Earthbound settled onto the landing pad with a series of concerning metallic groans, Marcus caught sight of himself in a mirror and winced. His uniform was clean but clearly showed years of wear, and his brown hair needed a trim. He looked exactly like what he was, a working-class human from the frontier who had no business being in the same star system as galactic royalty. The docking bay doors sealed behind him with a sound like distant thunder, and Marcus found himself in an atmosphere of filtered starlight that somehow managed to be both dim and brilliantly illuminated at the same time. A delegation of Zephyrian courtiers waited for him, their crystalline forms draped in flowing garments that seemed to be woven from captured light itself. The head of the delegation stepped forward and bowed with fluid grace. "Captain Chen, I am Advisor Keth Miran. Her Imperial Majesty awaits your presence in the throne chamber. If you would follow me, please." Marcus followed the advisor through corridors that defied his understanding of architecture. The walls seemed to flow like frozen water, creating alcoves and chambers that hadn't been there moments before. Art that he couldn't begin to comprehend shifted and changed as they passed, telling stories in languages of light and shadow that spoke directly to emotions he couldn't name. Other beings moved through the corridors with them, tall, elegant Zephyrians, the squat but brilliant Korgan engineers with their metal-enhanced limbs, graceful Silithai who seemed to float rather than walk, and dozens of other species Marcus recognized from his travels. All of them were clearly important, dressed in the finest garments their respective cultures could produce, and all of them stared at the human in the worn cargo hauler's uniform who was being escorted toward the heart of the Empire. The throne chamber was a sphere of perfect crystal that hung suspended in space, connected to the main station by bridges of light that somehow supported their weight. As Marcus stepped onto one of these bridges, he could see the stars wheeling below his feet, and, for a moment, vertigo threatened to overwhelm him. Advisor Kethmiran noticed his discomfort and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "The first time is always disorienting," the Zephyrian said kindly. "Focus on the destination, not the journey." Inside the chamber, the Empress sat upon a throne that seemed to be carved from a single, massive diamond. She was ancient even by Zephyrian standards, her crystalline skin showing the deep clarity that came with millennia of life, but her eyes burned with an intensity that made Marcus feel like she was seeing straight through him to his very soul. Empress Valen was not alone on the dais. Beside her stood a figure that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. She was younger than the Empress, though still clearly mature by human standards, with the characteristic beauty of Zephyrian nobility, but something else as well, something that seemed almost familiar in a way that Marcus couldn't place. Her crystalline skin held flecks of what looked like gold, and her eyes, instead of the usual silver blue of her species, were a warm amber that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of his sister's eyes. "Approach, Captain Chen," the Empress said, her voice carrying easily across the vast chamber without seeming loud. "We have much to discuss." Marcus walked across the crystal floor, his boots making soft clicking sounds that echoed strangely in the vast space. When he reached the base of the dais, he wasn't sure whether he should bow, salute, or simply stand at attention. In the end, he settled for a respectful nod. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said, proud that his voice didn't crack. "You summoned me?" The Empress studied him for a long moment, her ancient eyes taking in every detail of his appearance. Finally, she spoke. "Tell me, Captain Chen, what do you know of human history?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "I'm not a historian, Your Majesty. I know the basics: Earth, the early colony ships, the first contact with other species. Standard education stuff. And, what do you know of your species' reputation among the galactic community?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "That we're young, I suppose. Impulsive. Some species think we're too aggressive, others think we're too emotional. We don't have the advanced technology or the ancient wisdom of older civilizations." "Indeed," the Empress said, rising from her throne. "Young, impulsive, emotional, and lacking in sophisticated technology. This is how most beings see humanity. But I have had occasion to observe your species more closely than most, and I have learned something that others have missed." She began to descend the steps of the dais, her movements so fluid it seemed like she was flowing rather than walking. "Humans," she continued, "possess something that most advanced civilizations have lost through millennia of sophistication and progress. You have what the ancient philosophers called the guardian instinct, the primitive, irrational, utterly unshakable compulsion to protect those placed in your care, regardless of the cost to yourselves." Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he remained silent. The Empress reached the bottom of the steps and stood directly in front of him. Up close, Marcus could see that her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences spanning centuries, and something else, a weariness that even her regal bearing couldn't entirely hide. "Captain Chen," she said, "I am going to tell you something that no one outside this chamber knows. My son, Prince Darien, chose to marry a human woman 43 years ago." Marcus felt his eyes widen. Interspecies marriage wasn't unheard of, but between humans and Zephyrians it was extremely rare due to the vast differences in lifespan and biology. The marriage was not popular with the court, the Empress continued. Humans live such brief lives compared to ours, and there were concerns about the political implications. But my son loved her, and she loved him, and I have learned that love transcends the boundaries we try to place upon it. She gestured to the younger woman who had remained silent on the dais. "This is Princess Lyra, their daughter. She is my granddaughter, and she is half human." Marcus looked up at the princess with new eyes. That explained the golden flecks in her skin and the amber eyes, human traits expressing themselves through Zephyrian genetics. She was beautiful in a way that seemed to combine the best of both species, but there was something in her expression that spoke of challenges Marcus could only imagine. 3 days ago, the Empress continued, her voice taking on a grim tone, my son and his wife were killed in what appeared to be a shuttle accident while traveling to a trade conference in the Andorian sector. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. I'm sorry for your loss, Your Majesty. It was not an accident, the Empress said flatly. It was assassination. Prince Darien had been working on a series of reforms that would have extended greater rights and representation to younger species in the Empire, including humanity. There are those who saw this as a threat to the established order. The pieces began to click together in Marcus's mind, and he didn't like the picture they were forming. And Princess Lyra is now first in line for succession to the imperial throne, the Empress finished. She is also half human, which makes her a target for those who would prefer to see the Empire remain in the hands of the pure elder species. There have already been 2 attempts on her life. Marcus looked up at the princess again, seeing her in an entirely new light. She wasn't just royalty, she was a symbol of everything that certain factions in the Empire feared and hated about the changing galactic order. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, Marcus said carefully, but I still don't understand why you've summoned me. The Empress smiled, and, for the first time since he'd entered the chamber, Marcus saw genuine warmth in her expression. Because, Captain Chen, I need someone to keep my granddaughter safe while I root out the conspiracy that killed my son. I need someone who will guard her not out of duty or political necessity, but out of that primitive human instinct that compels your species to protect the innocent regardless of the personal cost. Marcus felt the weight of her request settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. Your Majesty, I'm honored that you would consider me, but I'm just a cargo hauler. I don't have any special training in protection or security. Surely your own guards, or professional bodyguards, or can be bought, the Empress interrupted. Can be threatened. Can have their loyalty turned through political pressure or personal connections. You, Captain Chen, have no stake in imperial politics. You have no connections to the noble houses that might influence your judgment. You are, as you say, just a cargo hauler, but that is precisely what makes you perfect for this task. She stepped closer, and Marcus could see his own reflection in her crystalline skin. More importantly, you are human. And humans, when they give their word to protect someone, have a disturbing tendency to keep that promise even when it defies all logic and self-preservation. Marcus looked up at Princess Lyra again. She was watching the conversation with an expression that seemed to mix hope and skepticism in equal measure. She was young, probably in her 20s by human standards, though with Zephyrian longevity she could be decades older, and there was something in her amber eyes that reminded him powerfully of his youngest sister back on Earth. The same intelligence, the same stubborn determination, and, underneath it all, the same vulnerability that came with being young in a dangerous universe. What exactly would you need me to do? He asked. Take her away from here, the Empress said. Hide her. Keep her safe while I deal with the conspirators. It may take months, or even years. I will provide you with resources, new identities, a ship that doesn't look like it's held together with hope and determination. All I ask is that you keep her alive. Marcus considered the request. It would mean abandoning his cargo routes, his carefully built reputation, his comfortable if modest life hauling freight across the outer rim. It would mean taking responsibility for the most important person in the galaxy, with resources and enemies he couldn't even imagine. It would also mean doing what his father had taught him was the most important thing a person could do, protecting someone who needed protection. If I agree to this, Marcus said slowly, I give you my word that I'll keep her safe. But I need your word on something too. The Empress raised one elegantly sculpted eyebrow. You would negotiate with me, Captain Chen? Not negotiate, Your Majesty. Just clarity. If I'm going to be responsible for her safety, I need to know that when the time comes to make decisions about that safety, my judgment won't be overruled by politics or protocol. If I say we need to run, we run. If I say we need to fight, we fight. If I say she can't do something because it's too dangerous, then she can't do it, royal blood or not. The Empress was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus wondered if he had overstepped some crucial boundary. Finally, she smiled. You see, she said, turning toward Princess Lyra.
This is exactly what I mean about the human guardian instinct. He hasn't even agreed to help yet, and he's already thinking like your protector rather than your servant.
Princess Lyra descended the steps of the dais, moving with the same fluid grace as her grandmother but, with something else, a hint of the more grounded, determined movement that Marcus associated with humans under pressure. "Captain Chen," she said, and her voice carried the musical quality of her Zephyrian heritage but, with warmer undertones that were purely human.
"Do you really think you can keep me safe? I'm not some helpless royal who's never left the palace. I can take care of myself."
Marcus looked into her amber eyes and saw the same fierce independence that had made his sister insist on joining the merchant marine despite their parents' protests. It was a quality he respected, but it was also one that could get people killed if it wasn't properly channeled. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "I'm sure you're very capable. But being able to take care of yourself in a palace surrounded by guards and protocols is different from staying alive when professional assassins are hunting you across the galaxy. If I agree to this, and if you agree to let me do my job, then, yes, I think I can keep you safe."
"And if I don't agree to let you do your job?"
Marcus shrugged. "Then, you'll probably get us both killed, and I'll have broken my word to your grandmother."
"I'd rather not do that."
Princess Lyra stared at him for a moment, then turned to the Empress.
"Grandmother, are you certain about this?"
"He's very
human," the Empress suggested with amusement. "Direct? Unimpressed by royal protocol?"
"Yes, my dear, that's rather the point." Princess Lyra looked back at Marcus, studying him with an intensity that reminded him uncomfortably of her grandmother's earlier examination.
"What makes you think you're qualified to protect me?"
"Honestly?"
Marcus said. "I don't know that I am.
But I do know that if I give my word to keep you safe, I'll die before I let anything happen to you."
"Sometimes that's enough."
The princess was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly.
"All right, Captain Chen. If you're willing to risk your life for a stranger, then I'm willing to trust you with mine." Marcus turned back to the Empress. "Then, I accept, Your Majesty.
I'll keep her safe." The Empress smiled, and, for the first time since he'd entered the chamber, Marcus saw some of the tension leave her shoulders.
"Thank you, Captain Chen. You cannot know how much this means to me." "Just promise me one thing, Your Majesty," Marcus said.
"When this is over, when the conspirators are dealt with and Princess Lyra can come home safely, make sure the reforms her father was working on don't die with him. If I'm going to risk everything to protect your granddaughter, at least let it be for something that will make the galaxy a better place." The Empress regarded him with something that might have been surprise, then bowed her head slightly in acknowledgement.
"You have my word, Captain Chen. The reforms will continue."
As Marcus left the throne chamber an hour later, his mind was already racing with plans and preparations. He had agreed to take on the most important and dangerous job of his life, protecting someone he barely knew from enemies he couldn't identify. It should have terrified him. Instead, as he thought about Princess Lyra's amber eyes and the determined set of her jaw, Marcus found himself oddly looking forward to the challenge. After 12 years of hauling cargo across empty space, it felt good to have a mission that actually mattered. He just hoped he was half as capable as the Empress seemed to think he was. The ship that the Empress provided was nothing like the battered cargo hauler Marcus was used to flying. The Stellar Dawn was a sleek courier vessel designed to look unremarkable while packing enough firepower to fight its way out of most situations. Its hull was matte gray, the kind of nondescript color that made security officers look right past it at spaceports, but Marcus's experienced eye could spot the subtle modifications that marked it as something special. Military-grade shields, Princess Lyra observed, running her hand along one of the engine housings as they conducted their pre-departure inspection. Class 7 defensive arrays, and, unless I'm mistaken, those are Korgan plasma cannons disguised as standard ion drives. Marcus paused in his examination of the navigation console to look at her with new respect.
"You know your starship systems."
My father believed that anyone who might someday rule an interstellar empire should understand the tools of that empire, she replied, her amber eyes bright with intelligence. "I've been studying starship design since I was old enough to read." "Good," Marcus said, turning back to the console.
"That'll make this easier."
A lot of protection work fails because the principal doesn't understand the capabilities and limitations of their own resources. They had been preparing for departure for 2 days, during which Marcus had been surprised to discover that Princess Lyra was far from the sheltered royal he had expected. She spoke 4 galactic languages fluently, had trained with both Zephyrian crystal combat techniques and human martial arts, and possessed an engineer's understanding of the technology that kept starships functioning. More importantly, she seemed to genuinely understand the gravity of their situation. "Where are we going?" she asked, settling into the co-pilot's seat as Marcus began the startup sequence. "Nowhere," at first, Marcus replied, his hands moving over the controls with practiced efficiency. "We're going to spend the first few weeks jumping randomly through hyperspace while I teach you everything I know about staying alive when people are trying to kill you. No destinations, no patterns, nothing that can be predicted or traced." Princess Lyra nodded approvingly. "Sound strategy. How long before we can risk stopping somewhere?" "Depends on how quickly your grandmother can narrow down the list of suspects," Marcus said. The ship's engines hummed to life with a low, powerful sound that spoke of expensive engineering. "Could be months. Could be years." "And you're prepared for that? Years of running and hiding with someone you barely know?" Marcus glanced at her as he requested departure clearance from the palace's flight control. "Your Highness, I gave my word to keep you safe. The timeline doesn't change the commitment." Something in his tone must have convinced her, because she leaned back in her seat with a small smile. "You really are everything my grandmother said about humans, aren't you? What's that supposed to mean?" "Stubborn. Loyal to a fault. Willing to make promises that any sensible being would hedge with conditions and escape clauses." Marcus guided the ship out of the palace's docking bay and into the vast emptiness of space beyond. Behind them, the palace of infinite stars grew smaller against the starfield, its crystal spires still catching and refracting light in brilliant displays of color. "Maybe," Marcus said. "But sometimes the galaxy needs people who are willing to make those kinds of promises." Their first jump took them to an empty patch of space between star systems, where Marcus began what he privately thought of as Princess Lyra's crash course in survival. Over the following days, as they made random jumps through hyperspace, he taught her everything his 12 years of frontier life had taught him about reading people, spotting danger, and staying alive in hostile environments. The key, he explained as they practiced hand-to-hand combat techniques in the ship's small cargo bay, is to always have an exit strategy. Never go anywhere you can't leave quickly, never trust anyone completely, and always assume that someone is watching. Princess Lyra absorbed the lessons with an eagerness that surprised him. Despite her royal upbringing, she adapted quickly to the mindset of someone living on the run. She learned to spot the subtle signs that marked plainclothes security, to identify the best escape routes in any room, and to move through crowds without drawing attention to herself. "You're a natural at this," Marcus observed after she successfully demonstrated how to disappear into a crowd during a combat simulation in the ship's holographic training room. "I had good teachers," she replied, breathing hard from the exercise. "My mother insisted I learn practical skills alongside the formal education required for royalty. She said that a ruler who couldn't take care of themselves couldn't be trusted to take care of their people." Marcus felt a pang of sympathy as he saw the shadow that crossed her face when she mentioned her parents. "Tell me about them," he said gently. Princess Lyra settled onto one of the cargo containers, her expression growing distant. "My father was everything you'd expect from a Zephyrian prince: elegant, educated, diplomatic. But he was also genuinely committed to making the empire better for everyone, not just the established noble houses. He used to say that the greatest civilizations were the ones that lifted up all their people, not just the privileged few." "And your mother?" "She was remarkable," the princess said, her voice warming with affection. "She came from a middle-class family on one of the human colony worlds. Nothing special by royal standards, just a linguist who specialized in interspecies communication. But she had this way of seeing through all the political maneuvering and getting straight to the heart of what mattered. My father used to joke that she was the only being in the galaxy who could make him feel like a naive idealist and a cynical politician at the same time." Marcus could hear the love and loss in her voice, and he found himself thinking about his own family back on Earth. "They sound like good people." "They were," Princess Lyra said quietly. And now they're gone, and I'm supposed to somehow carry on their work while hiding from the people who killed them. You don't have to carry on their work right now, Marcus said firmly.
Right now, your only job is to stay alive. The work can wait until you're safe to do it.
She looked at him with those amber eyes that reminded him so much of his sister.
Is that what you really think? That their reform should wait while I hide?
Marcus considered his words carefully. I think that dead martyrs don't accomplish much except inspiring other people to die nobly. Live rulers, on the other hand, can actually change things. Princess Lyra was quiet for a moment, then smiled.
My mother would have liked you.
She always said that humans had a gift for reducing complex philosophical questions to simple practical choices.
Was she right?
Usually. It was one of the things that made her so effective at diplomatic negotiations. While everyone else was debating the theoretical implications of various proposals, she'd ask the simple question, what do we actually want to accomplish here? Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm from the ship's sensor array. Marcus was on his feet immediately, his hand moving instinctively toward the weapon at his side.
What is it?
Princess Lyra asked, following him to the bridge. Marcus studied the sensor readings, his expression growing grim.
We've got company.
3 ships, coming in fast on an intercept course.
Imperial Navy?
Negative. These are reading as independent vessels, but they're flying in perfect formation and using military communication protocols. Marcus's fingers flew over the controls as he began evasive maneuvers.
Someone leaked our location.
Princess Lyra strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat, her face pale but determined.
How is that possible? We've been making random jumps.
There's no way they could have predicted where we'd be. Unless they're not predicting, Marcus replied grimly, pushing the ship's engines to maximum power.
Unless they're tracking us somehow.
The pursuing ships were gaining ground despite the Stellar Dawn's impressive speed. Marcus could see them on the tactical display now, sleek black vessels with no identifying markings, the kind of ships that didn't officially exist and were never supposed to be traced back to their owners.
Can we outrun them? Princess Lyra asked.
Not with them already this close, Marcus replied, making a quick calculation.
But we might be able to outfight them. This ship has more firepower than it looks like.
Or we could surrender and find out what they want. Marcus shot her a sharp look. Your Highness, people who want to talk don't usually send unmarked attack ships. These are assassins, and they're here to finish what they started with your parents.
As if to prove his point, the lead pursuit ship opened fire.
Energy bolts lanced through space around them, several close enough to trigger the Stellar Dawn's defensive shields. Surrender is no longer an option, Marcus said dryly, returning fire with the ship's concealed weapons. The Korgan plasma cannons that Princess Lyra had identified earlier revealed themselves in brilliant flashes of destructive energy. The space battle that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. His years flying cargo runs had given him plenty of experience with basic combat maneuvers, but these weren't pirates or system patrol boats. These were professional killers flying military-grade hardware, and they knew exactly what they were doing. Shield strength down to 60%, Princess Lyra reported, monitoring the defensive systems with the competence of a trained officer.
That last hit damaged the port stabilizer.
Marcus rolled the ship hard to starboard, avoiding another volley of enemy fire while lining up a shot on the nearest attacker. The Stellar Dawn shuddered as its weapons fired, and Marcus had the satisfaction of seeing one of the pursuit ships bloom into an expanding cloud of superheated plasma. 1 down, he said grimly.
2 to go.
But the remaining attackers had learned from their partner's destruction. They split up, forcing Marcus to divide his attention between multiple threats while trying to keep the ship's damaged systems functioning. Warning alarms filled the bridge with urgent electronic sounds. Marcus at Princess Lyra said, using his first name for the first time since they'd met, "A hyperdrive is charging."
We could jump.
Not yet, Marcus replied, sending another burst of plasma fire toward the nearest attacker.
If we jump with damaged systems, we could end up anywhere. Or nowhere.
The second attacker's ship exploded in a brilliant flash as Marcus's aim found its mark, but the third ship had managed to get behind them. Energy bolts hammered into the Stellar Dawn's rear shields, and Marcus felt the ship shudder around them.
"Shield failure imminent," Princess Lyra warned. "Whatever you're going to do it fast."
Marcus made a decision that would have horrified any sane pilot. Instead of trying to escape the remaining attacker, he cut power to the engines and spun the ship around, bringing the forward weapons to bear at point-blank range. The enemy pilot had a split second to realize what was happening before the Stellar Dawn's plasma cannons fired at minimum range. The explosion was close enough to buffet their own ship with debris and radiation.
"Insane," Princess Lyra breathed, staring at the tactical display. "Completely insane."
"But effective," Marcus replied, beginning the process of assessing damage and planning their next move.
"Sometimes insanity is the only rational response to an irrational situation."
As they limped toward the nearest inhabited system for repairs, Princess Lyra turned to Marcus with an expression of newfound respect.
"I owe you an apology," she said quietly.
"For what?"
"For doubting my grandmother's choice. I thought she was being sentimental, choosing a human protector because of some romantic notion about your species. I was wrong."
Marcus shrugged, focusing on the navigation controls.
"You weren't wrong to be skeptical.
I'm still just a cargo hauler who got lucky."
"No," Princess Lyra said firmly.
"A cargo hauler would have tried to run or surrender. A protector does exactly what you did, whatever it takes to keep their charge safe, no matter how dangerous or crazy it might be." Marcus glanced at her, seeing something new in those amber eyes, not just respect, but trust. The kind of trust that had to be earned through action rather than words.
"Don't thank me yet," he said.
"We still don't know how they found us, which means we're not safe.
And if there was one team of assassins, there will be others."
Princess Lyra nodded, her expression growing serious again. "Then, we'd better figure out how they're tracking us before the next team shows up." As Marcus guided their damaged ship toward the distant glow of a star system that might offer sanctuary, he found himself thinking about the commitment he had made to the Empress. Keeping Princess Lyra safe was turning out to be more complicated than he had anticipated, but it was also more important. She wasn't just a royal heir, she was a symbol of everything that could be right about the galaxy, a bridge between species and cultures that represented hope for a better future. He had given his word to protect her, and, as the Stellar Dawn limped through space toward an uncertain destination, Marcus Chen prepared to discover just how far a human would go to keep a promise. The mining station at Kepler 442b was exactly the kind of place Marcus had hoped to avoid, a rough frontier outpost where questions weren't asked as long as credits were good and weapons stayed holstered. But, with their hyperdrive making ominous grinding noises and their shield generators operating at less than 30% efficiency, they didn't have much choice. "Remember," Marcus said as they prepared to dock, "you're Elena Vesquez, junior engineer from the Outer Rim colonies. Keep your head down, don't make eye contact with anyone who looks like trouble, and let me do the talking." Princess Lyra, now Elena, nodded, pulling the hood of her worn coveralls up to hide her distinctive crystalline features. The disguise was good but not perfect. Close examination would reveal that her skin held a subtle luminescence that no amount of makeup could completely hide. "How long for repairs?" she asked, checking the small holdout blaster Marcus had insisted she carry. "At least 6 hours for the hyperdrive, maybe twice that if they have to fabricate parts," Marcus replied, guiding the ship into the station's docking bay. "The shield generators are going to take longer unless we can find military-grade components, which isn't likely on a mining station." The docking bay was a chaos of activity: cargo haulers like Marcus's old ship, mining vessels scarred by asteroid impacts, and the occasional smuggler's ship that tried a little too hard to look innocent. The air was thick with the smell of reactor coolant and unwashed bodies, a combination that reminded Marcus of a dozen similar stations he'd visited over the years. As they made their way to the station's commercial district, Marcus kept one eye on the crowd and another on Princess Lyra. She was doing well with the disguise, moving with the slightly hunched posture of someone accustomed to low gravity and keeping her eyes down like a junior engineer who didn't want to attract attention. But there was something about the way she carried herself, a subtle dignity that spoke of royal bearing, that made Marcus nervous. The parts dealer Marcus found was exactly what he'd expected: a grizzled Korgan whose cybernetic arm could probably crush a steel beam, operating out of a shop that smelled like ozone and old metal. His prices were outrageous, but Marcus had expected that. "Hyperdrive motivator for a Meridian-class courier," the Korgan said, his mechanical voice carrying a hint of suspicion.
That's military hardware. Not the kind of thing you usually see on civilian ships.
It's a decommissioned security vessel, Marcus replied smoothly.
Bought it at auction.
You know how it is, sometimes the military stuff is built to better standards than civilian hardware. The Korgan's organic eye studied Marcus for a moment, then shifted to Princess Lyra.
Your engineer doesn't say much.
She's shy, Marcus said.
Brilliant with hyperdrives, terrible with people.
Princess Lyra managed what Marcus hoped was a convincing nervous smile. The Korgan grunted and turned back to his inventory list. I can get you the motivator, but it'll take 4 hours and cost you 12,000 credits. Marcus winced but nodded.
Fine. What about shield generators? Now that's going to be a problem, the Korgan said.
Military-grade shields aren't something I keep in stock. Might be able to find you something on the black market, but you're talking serious money and serious risks. As they haggled over prices and delivery times, Marcus became aware that they were being watched. A human in expensive clothes was standing at the far end of the market corridor, pretending to examine a display of asteroid mining equipment while keeping one eye on Marcus and Princess Lyra. Marcus finished the transaction without showing any sign that he'd noticed their observer, but, as they left the parts dealer's shop, he steered Princess Lyra toward a different route back to their ship.
We've got a tail, he said quietly.
I saw him, Princess Lyra replied.
Human, well-dressed, probably not local. He's been following us since we left the docking bay.
Marcus felt a surge of approval.
Her training was paying off. Any idea how he made us? The ship registry, maybe? Or someone at the docking bay recognized our faces?
Before Marcus could reply, their tail made his move. Instead of continuing to follow them, the man stepped into their path, his hands held peacefully at his sides but positioned where he could reach the weapon Marcus could now see concealed beneath his jacket. Captain Shen, the man said, his voice carrying the cultured accent of the core worlds.
Princess Lyra. My name is Agent Thorne, Imperial Intelligence Service. I need to speak with you.
Marcus's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm, but the agent shook his head.
Please, Captain. If I wanted you dead, you would be. I'm here to help.
Prove it, Marcus said flatly. Agent Thorne reached slowly into his jacket and produced a small holographic projector. When activated, it displayed the image of Empress Valen, though she looked older and more careworn than when Marcus had last seen her. Captain Shen, Princess Lyra, the recorded image said, if you are seeing this message, then Agent Thorne has successfully located you. I am sending him because the situation has become more complicated than we initially believed.
Trust him as you would trust me. The hologram flickered and died.
Marcus studied the agent's face, looking for signs of deception, but found only professional competence and what might have been genuine concern.
All right, Marcus said finally. We'll listen. But not here. Too many eyes and ears. Agent Thorne nodded.
There's a private meeting room above the cantina in Section C.
I've already secured it.
The meeting room turned out to be exactly what Marcus had expected, a dingy space that smelled of recycled air and spilled alcohol, with privacy dampeners that would prevent electronic eavesdropping.
Agent Thorne activated additional security measures before settling into one of the room's worn chairs.
The good news, he began without preamble, is that the Empress has identified most of the conspirators behind your parents' assassination.
The bad news is that the conspiracy goes deeper than we thought, and includes several high-ranking members of the Imperial Navy.
Princess Lyra leaned forward, her amber eyes bright with anger.
Who? I want names.
Admiral Vextai of the Third Fleet, General Morrison of the Imperial Marines, and at least 6 members of the Noble Council, Agent Thorne replied. They call themselves the Purity Coalition, and their goal is to prevent what they see as the dilution of traditional imperial power by younger species. Marcus felt pieces clicking together in his mind. That explains how the assassination team found us. If they have allies in the Navy, they can access tracking systems and sensor networks that civilian smugglers couldn't touch.
Exactly, Agent Thorne said.
Which is why the Empress has authorized me to provide you with new identities and a clean ship. The stellar dawn is compromised, they're tracking it somehow, probably through its quantum signature. Princess Lyra was quiet for a moment, processing this information. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the steel beneath it.
What about my grandmother? Is she safe?
The Empress is as safe as anyone can be at the center of a political conspiracy, Agent Thorne replied. She's moving carefully, building evidence against the conspirators while avoiding anything that might trigger a military coup. But she needs time, and she needs you to stay alive long enough for her to finish the job.
How much time? Marcus asked. Months, possibly longer.
The conspiracy has connections throughout the government and military.
Moving against them too quickly could split the empire into civil war. Marcus understood the implications.
Princess Lyra wasn't just hiding from assassins, she was the key to preventing a galactic civil war that could kill billions.
Where do you want us to go? He asked.
Agent Thorne produced a data chip and slid it across the table. Deep cover identities, complete with work histories and family backgrounds. You'll be Marcus Torres and Elena Santos, independent salvage operators working the Outer Rim. There's a salvage ship waiting for you at Docking Bay 94, the Fortune's Dream. It's clean, untraceable, and equipped with everything you'll need to disappear into the salvage trade. Princess Lyra picked up the data chip, studying it as if it might contain the answers to all their problems.
What about staying in contact with my grandmother?
Dead drops only, Agent Thorne replied.
Prearranged locations and times.
Any other communication method is too risky. As if to emphasize his point, Marcus's comm unit chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at the display and felt his blood run cold. We need to go, he said, standing abruptly.
Now. What is it? Princess Lyra asked. Station security just issued an alert.
They're looking for Elena Vasquez and her captain in connection with stolen Imperial technology.
Marcus was already moving toward the door. Someone just burned our current identities.
Agent Thorne was on his feet as well, his weapon appearing in his hand with professional smoothness.
The docking bay.
We need to get you to the new ship before the lights went out, plunging the room into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on a moment later, casting everything in a hellish red glow. Station lockdown, Agent Thorne said grimly.
They're sealing all docking bays. We're trapped.
Marcus grabbed Princess Lyra's arm, his mind racing through possibilities.
Not necessarily. This is a mining station, there are always maintenance tunnels and service corridors that don't show up on official schematics. And you know about them how? Princess Lyra asked as they slipped out of the meeting room into chaos.
Station security was rushing through the corridors, and Marcus could hear the distinctive whine of stunner weapons being charged. Because I've been stuck on stations like this before, Marcus replied, leading them down a side corridor that seemed to lead away from the main commercial areas.
Maintenance crews always know the hidden ways to get around. The question is whether I can remember the layout well enough to find them.
They made their way through increasingly narrow corridors, avoiding security patrols and the groups of armed men in civilian clothes who were obviously working with the conspirators. Marcus's knowledge of station design served them well. They managed to reach the maintenance section without being spotted, though they could hear sounds of searching getting closer. There, Marcus said, pointing to what looked like a standard maintenance access panel.
That should lead to the primary service tunnel. If we can reach it, we can get to the docking bays without using the main corridors. Agent Thorne was already working on the access panel with tools that definitely weren't standard issue.
Security lock, but nothing I can't handle.
Give me 30 seconds.
Those 30 seconds stretched like hours as Marcus listened to the sounds of the search getting closer. He could hear voices, some speaking in the cultured tones of Imperial officers, others in the rougher accents of hired muscle. All of them sounded determined and well-organized. Got it, Agent Thorne whispered as the access panel slid open.
Service tunnel confirmed. It should take us directly to Docking Bay 94.
The tunnel was exactly what Marcus had expected, a narrow, dimly lit passage that carried the station's primary utility lines. It was cramped, uncomfortable, and smelled like a combination of recycled air and industrial lubricants, but it was also unmonitored and unguarded.
They crawled through the tunnel for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, following the route Agent Thorne had mapped on his portable scanner. Finally, they reached another access panel that opened into a utility room adjacent to their target docking bay. "The Fortune's Dream is just beyond that bulkhead," Agent Thorne whispered, checking his scanner for signs of security presence. "Bay looks clear, but that could change fast." Marcus peered through the utility room's small window into the docking bay beyond. The Fortune's Dream was there, a battered-looking salvage vessel that looked like it had seen better decades. It was exactly the kind of ship that nobody looked at twice, which made it perfect for their purposes. "All right," Marcus said. "We go fast and quiet. Once we're aboard, we launch immediately. No time for proper pre-flight checks." They slipped into the docking bay, moving quickly toward the ship. Marcus was already pulling up the ramp when station security finally arrived, pouring into the bay with weapons drawn and orders to surrender. "So much for fast and quiet," Princess Lyra observed as Marcus fired up the ship's engines without waiting for clearance from station control. "Sometimes you have to improvise," Marcus replied, lifting the ship off the docking bay floor as energy bolts from security weapons sparked against their hull. "Agent Thorne, please tell me this ship has better shields than our last one." "Military surplus but fully functional," the agent replied, strapping himself into a passenger seat. "And the hyperdrive is rated for emergency jumps." "Good, because we're about to make one." The Fortune's Dream burst out of the docking bay into the space around the mining station, where Marcus discovered that their problems had just gotten worse. 3 Imperial Navy destroyers were waiting for them, their weapons already trained on the fleeing salvage ship. "This is Admiral Vextai of the Imperial Navy," came a voice over the comm system. "Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Marcus looked at Princess Lyra, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her amber eyes. They could surrender and hope that the conspiracy would give them a trial before executing them, or they could run and hope that a salvage ship could outmaneuver 3 military destroyers. "Your call, Your Highness," he said quietly. Princess Lyra's answer was to reach over and activate the ship's hyperdrive herself. "Let's see what this old ship can do." The Fortune's Dream jumped to hyperspace just as the destroyers opened fire, leaving the mining station and its troubles behind in a flash of twisted spacetime. But, as Marcus watched the hyperspace tunnel form around them, he knew that they were no longer just running from assassins. They were now fugitives from the Empire itself, and the hunt for Princess Lyra had just become the most important chase in galactic history. The Fortune's Dream dropped out of hyperspace in an empty sector between star systems, its aging engines cycling down with mechanical sounds that spoke of years of hard use. Marcus had chosen the location carefully, far enough from any inhabited systems to avoid detection, but close enough to a shipping lane that they could intercept merchant traffic if they needed supplies. 3 months, Princess Lyra said, reviewing the intelligence reports that Agent Thorne had provided before his death during their escape from the mining station. "We've been running for 3 months, and the conspiracy has only gotten stronger." Marcus studied the star charts displayed on the ship's holographic projector, looking for patterns in the Imperial Navy's search operations. "They control a third of the fleet now, and they've convinced the Noble Council that you're a security threat who needs to be captured for your own protection. While my grandmother fights a political battle she can't win without proof of their crimes," Princess Lyra added bitterly. "Proof that died with Agent Thorne when that destroyer hit us." The past 3 months had been a nightmare of narrow escapes and close calls. They had barely gotten away from the mining station before Agent Thorne succumbed to injuries from the destroyer attack, but not before he had transferred crucial intelligence to Marcus's personal data systems. That intelligence had painted a picture of conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of imperial government. Admiral Vextai wasn't just leading a military faction opposed to Prince Darian's reforms, he was planning a complete coup that would place the Empire under military rule, with himself as the power behind a puppet emperor. Princess Lyra's mixed heritage made her the perfect scapegoat, a symbol of everything that the Purity Coalition claimed was wrong with the current system. "We can't keep running forever," Princess Lyra said, settling into the co-pilot's seat that had become her permanent station over their months together. "Eventually they'll corner us, or we'll make a mistake, or just run out of places to hide." Marcus had been thinking the same thing, but hearing it from her made the situation seem more real. "What are you suggesting? That we stop running and start fighting back? Against the Imperial Navy?" In a salvage ship that's held together by spare parts and optimism?
Princess Lyra turned to face him, and Marcus saw something in her amber eyes that reminded him powerfully of her grandmother, a steely determination that spoke of royal authority backed by absolute will.
Not against the Navy, she said. Against the conspiracy. We have Agent Thorne's intelligence files.
We know who the conspirators are, how they communicate, where they operate.
Instead of hiding from them, we start hunting them.
Marcus considered this idea, turning it over in his mind like a problem in astrogation.
It's dangerous. More dangerous than anything we've done so far.
Everything we've done has been dangerous, Princess Lyra pointed out. At least this way we'd be taking the initiative instead of just reacting to their moves.
She had a point.
Their months on the run had shown Marcus that the conspiracy's resources were vast and their reach was long. Sooner or later, they would be caught unless they changed the fundamental nature of the game they were playing.
All right, Marcus said finally. Let's say we try it.
Where do we start? Princess Lyra activated the holographic display, calling up Agent Thorne's intelligence files. Here, she said, pointing to a data cluster that showed communication patterns between various conspiracy members.
Colonel Reyes of Imperial Intelligence. He's been coordinating the search for us, but he's also been embezzling funds from the intelligence budget to pay for mercenary operations. You want to expose his corruption?
I want to capture him, Princess Lyra said. Get him to confess to his crimes on record, then broadcast that confession to the Imperial Senate and the public media networks. Marcus studied the tactical situation. He's protected by Imperial intelligence security protocols and a personal guard detail. Getting to him would require someone with no official status, no traceable identity, and nothing left to lose, Princess Lyra finished.
Someone exactly like us.
Over the following days, they developed a plan that was audacious, dangerous, and probably suicidal. Colonel Reyes was scheduled to attend a military conference on Centauri Prime, one of the Empire's most heavily defended core worlds. Security would be intense, but that same security would provide cover for a well-planned infiltration. The key, Marcus explained as they rehearsed their approach for the 100th time, is that everyone will be expecting external threats. They won't be looking for infiltrators who are already inside their security perimeter.
Princess Lyra nodded, adjusting the holographic disguise unit that would make her appear to be a human intelligence officer. And, once we're inside, we use the confusion of the conference to isolate Reyes and extract him. Extract him to where?
We can't take him back to the ship. That would expose our location and our escape route.
We don't take him anywhere, Princess Lyra said.
We make him confess right there, in front of the other conference attendees. Live witnesses from multiple worlds and factions. Marcus stared at her.
You want to reveal your identity? In front of Imperial military officers who have orders to capture or kill you?
Some of those officers are loyal to my grandmother, not to the conspiracy, Princess Lyra replied. And some of them are good people who joined the military to serve the Empire, not to participate in illegal coups. If they see proof that their orders are based on lies and corruption, some of them will choose to do the right thing. It was a gamble that would put Princess Lyra's life at risk in a way that nothing they had done before compared to. But, as Marcus studied the intelligence files and considered their alternatives, he realized it might be their only chance to break the stalemate that was slowly destroying the Empire from within.
All right, he said. We'll try it.
But I want contingency plans for everything that can go wrong, and exit strategies for every possible scenario. The infiltration of Centauri Prime's orbital conference facility went better than Marcus had dared to hope. Their forged credentials held up under scrutiny, their disguises passed visual inspection, and the security protocols that were designed to keep threats out also kept security personnel from paying too much attention to people who were already inside. Colonel Reyes was exactly what Marcus had expected, a career intelligence officer who had learned to use his position for personal gain while maintaining the appearance of dedicated service. He was also overconfident, surrounded by subordinates who hung on his every word and military officers who deferred to his expertise in security matters. The terrorist Princess Lyra remains at large, Reyes was telling a group of senior officers during a break between conference sessions. But our sources indicate that her protector is becoming increasingly desperate. It's only a matter of time before they make a mistake that allows us to capture them both. Marcus, disguised as a junior intelligence analyst, moved closer to the group while Princess Lyra positioned herself near the room's emergency exits. They had rehearsed this moment dozens of times, but Marcus still felt his heart racing as he activated the recording device hidden in his uniform. "Colonel Reyes," Marcus said, approaching the group with the diffident manner of a subordinate seeking attention from a superior.
"I have some questions about the funding for Operation Purity. The accounting records show some irregularities that I'm having trouble reconciling."
Reyes's expression shifted slightly, a barely perceptible tightening around his eyes that Marcus recognized as the look of a man who had just heard something he didn't want to hear.
"What kind of irregularities?" Reyes asked casually.
"Well, sir, there are payments to several mercenary organizations that don't appear in any official operation orders. And there are equipment purchases that seem to exceed the authorized budget allocations for intelligence operations." Marcus could see other officers beginning to pay attention to the conversation. Some looked curious, others appeared concerned, and a few had the expression of people who were hearing confirmation of suspicions they had already harbored. "Those payments are classified," Reyes said, his voice carrying a hint of warning.
"Above your clearance level."
"I understand that, sir," Marcus replied, maintaining his cover identity as a conscientious but naive analyst. "But the Senate Oversight Committee is asking questions about intelligence budget expenditures, and I need to be able to provide accurate accounting records."
That was when Princess Lyra made her move.
She deactivated her disguise unit, allowing her natural crystalline features to become visible, and stepped into the center of the group. "Perhaps I can answer some of those questions," she said, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of royal blood.
The reaction was immediate and dramatic.
Several officers reached for weapons, others stepped back in shock, and Colonel Reyes went pale as he realized what was happening. "Princess Lyra," he said, his voice strangled.
"You're under arrest for what?"
Princess Lyra interrupted, her amber eyes blazing with controlled fury.
"For being the victim of an assassination attempt? For surviving when my parents didn't? Or for uncovering evidence of your illegal operations and embezzlement?"
Marcus activated the room's public address system, broadcasting their conversation to the entire conference facility.
"Tell them about the mercenary payments, Colonel. Tell them about the off-books operations you've been funding with intelligence budget allocations."
"This is a terrorist attack," Reyes said desperately, looking around for support from the other officers. "She's a wanted fugitive, working with foreign agents to destabilize the Empire." But Marcus could see that many of the officers weren't buying Reyes's story. They were looking at Princess Lyra with expressions that ranged from curiosity to sympathy, and several were studying Reyes with the kind of professional suspicion that intelligence officers developed toward anyone whose story didn't add up.
"Foreign agents?"
Princess Lyra said, her voice carrying across the facility's communication system.
"Like the human cargo hauler who has risked his life to protect me for the past 6 months? Or do you mean the Imperial intelligence agent who died trying to expose your conspiracy?"
One of the senior officers present, a woman Marcus recognized as General Morrison from the conspiracy files, stepped forward with her hand on her weapon.
"Enough of this," Morrison said.
"Princess or not, you're a fugitive and a security threat. Surrender now or..." Her words were cut off as several other officers moved to block her draw, their own weapons appearing in their hands with the fluid motion of professional soldiers who had just chosen sides. General Morrison, one of them said. Marcus recognized him as Admiral Chen of the Fifth Fleet, one of the officers Agent Thorne had identified as loyal to the Empress. "I think we need to hear what the princess has to say before we make any decisions about arrests." What followed was 30 minutes of testimony that Marcus knew would change the course of galactic history. Princess Lyra laid out the entire conspiracy in precise detail, backed by evidence from Agent Thorne's intelligence files and her own observations of the past 6 months. She spoke about her parents' assassination, the attempts on her own life, and the systematic corruption that was eating away at the Empire's military and intelligence services. Colonel Reyes tried repeatedly to interrupt or discredit her testimony, but each time he spoke, he only succeeded in making himself look more guilty.
Finally, faced with evidence he couldn't refute and witnesses he couldn't intimidate, he broke.
"All right," he shouted, his professional composure finally cracking.
"Yes, we've been paying mercenaries. Yes, we've been operating outside official channels. But it was necessary. The princess represents everything that's wrong with the Empire's current direction.
Humans and other young species getting ideas above their station, diluting the authority of the established order. Someone had to act to preserve traditional imperial values. The silence that followed his confession was deafening. Marcus could see officers throughout the facility processing what they had just heard: a senior intelligence officer admitting to conspiracy, assassination, and treason in the name of preserving traditional values.
Admiral Chen was the first to speak.
Colonel Reyes, by the authority vested in me as a fleet commander of the Imperial Navy, I place you under arrest for conspiracy, treason, and violation of your oath of service. As security officers who had remained loyal to their oaths moved to restrain Reyes and General Morrison, Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Princess Lyra looking at him with an expression he had never seen before: not gratitude or respect, but something deeper. "You did it," she said quietly, speaking only to him despite the chaos happening around them.
"You kept me safe long enough to fight back."
Marcus smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he had been carrying.
"We did it. Together."
But even as they savored their victory, Marcus knew that their real work was just beginning. Exposing the conspiracy was only the first step toward healing the damage it had done to the Empire. The real challenge would be building something better from the pieces they had left behind. And, somehow, looking at Princess Lyra's determined expression as she began the process of reclaiming her birthright, Marcus thought they might actually succeed. 2 years had passed since the confrontation at Centauri Prime, and the Palace of Infinite Stars looked different to Marcus as his ship approached the familiar crystal spires. The same breathtaking architecture still caught starlight and refracted it into brilliant displays, but there was something new in the way the palace positioned itself, less like a fortress standing apart from the galaxy and more like a beacon welcoming travelers from across known space. The docking bay that received the New Horizon, Marcus's latest ship, a proper diplomatic vessel rather than a hastily converted salvage craft, bustled with activity that would have been impossible during his first visit. Zephyrian courtiers worked alongside human engineers, Korgan technicians collaborated with Silithai artists, and the musical babble of a dozen galactic languages filled the air with the sound of a truly diverse society. "It's remarkable," Princess Lyra, now Crown Princess Lyra, heir apparent to the imperial throne, said as they walked through corridors that had been redesigned to accommodate the different architectural preferences of various species. "Sometimes I can barely believe how much has changed."
Marcus nodded, though his attention was focused on the security arrangements around them.
2 years of hunting down the remaining conspiracy members had taught him to never completely relax his vigilance, even in the heart of the reformed empire. "Your grandmother's reforms are working."
"Our reforms," Princess Lyra corrected.
"None of this would have been possible without what we learned during those months on the run."
She was right.
The intelligence they had gathered about the conspiracy's operations had revealed not just criminal activity, but systematic flaws in how the Empire governed its diverse population. The Purity Coalition's ability to gain so much support had shown that many beings genuinely felt excluded from the imperial system, and addressing that exclusion had become the cornerstone of the new reforms. The throne chamber had been reconfigured as well, though it retained its essential character as a sphere of perfect crystal suspended in space. The throne itself remained unchanged, still carved from a single massive diamond, but it was now surrounded by a semicircle of smaller seats for representatives from major imperial worlds and species. The message was subtle but unmistakable: the Empress still ruled, but she no longer ruled alone. Empress Valen looked older than when Marcus had last seen her, but her eyes still burned with the same intensity that had convinced him to take on the mission of protecting her granddaughter. She smiled as they approached, rising from her throne with the fluid grace that marked her species. "Captain Chen," she said, using the formal title that Marcus had never quite gotten used to.
"Crown Princess Lyra. Welcome home."
Marcus bowed respectfully, still awed by the presence of the most powerful ruler in known space.
"Your Imperial Majesty. Thank you for summoning us." "Thank you for answering the summons," the Empress replied. "Though I suspect you both know why I've asked you to return."
Princess Lyra stepped forward, her posture carrying the confidence that 2 years of active leadership had given her. During their time hunting the remaining conspirators, she had grown from a sheltered royal into a formidable leader who commanded respect across the galaxy.
The Andromedans, Princess Lyra said. Their delegation is requesting formal diplomatic relations with the Empire. Marcus felt a familiar chill.
The Andromedans were from outside the galaxy entirely, representatives of a civilization so advanced that their technology seemed like magic to most Imperial citizens. First contact with them 6 months earlier had been peaceful, but their true intentions remained unknown.
Indeed, the Empress said. And their request comes with what some would consider an unusual condition.
Which is?
Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer.
They have specifically requested that the negotiations be conducted by Crown Princess Lyra, with you serving as her advisor and protector.
The Empress's expression grew thoughtful.
They say that they have observed our recent reforms and are impressed by the partnership between human pragmatism and Zephyrian wisdom that made them possible. Marcus exchanged a glance with Princess Lyra, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her amber eyes. Another mission, another chance to shape the future of galactic civilization.
Another opportunity to prove that humans could be trusted with responsibilities that most species would consider far beyond their capabilities. What do we know about them? Princess Lyra asked.
Very little, the Empress admitted. They arrived in ships that don't use any technology we recognize, established a base on the edge of Imperial space without asking permission, and have been conducting what appear to be scientific observations of our society. Their initial communications were polite but revealed almost nothing about their civilization or their true purposes. Marcus's protective instincts were already analyzing the situation. Unknown aliens with superior technology, requesting specific negotiators, operating from a position of strength that made Imperial military response inadvisable. It had all the hallmarks of a trap.
Why us specifically, he asked.
They could have requested experienced diplomats, military leaders, anyone with actual training in first contact protocols. Because, said a new voice from the chamber's entrance, we are not interested in diplomats or military leaders. We are interested in beings who have proven they can transcend the limitations of their own nature in service of something greater than themselves. Marcus spun toward the voice, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon before stopping as he took in the speaker's appearance. The Andromedan was humanoid but clearly alien, tall and slender with skin that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light. Its eyes were large and dark, holding depths that spoke of intelligence so vast that Marcus felt like a child trying to understand adult conversations. I am Observer Kethon, the being continued, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions Marcus couldn't quite perceive. I have been studying your empire for the past standard year, with particular attention to the events surrounding the recent political reforms.
Princess Lyra stepped forward, showing no sign of intimidation despite facing a being whose true capabilities were completely unknown. Observer Kethon.
We're honored by your presence, though I admit we're curious about your methods of observation. We have watched you, Crown Princess Lyra, as you grew from protected heir to active leader.
We have observed Captain Chen as he repeatedly chose duty over safety, principle over convenience.
Your partnership represents something that our civilization has not seen in this galaxy before, the combination of emotional commitment and rational pragmatism that allows beings to transcend their individual limitations. Marcus felt uncomfortable. We have the technology to assist in defending against these threats, but we have learned that technology alone is insufficient.
What is needed is the kind of moral courage and adaptive thinking that your recent reforms have demonstrated.
The Empress leaned forward on her throne, her ancient eyes sharp with interest.
What kind of threats?
Beings from outside both our galaxies, the observer said. Entities that consume civilizations not for resources or territory, but for the simple purpose of eliminating complexity from the universe. They are drawn to areas of high technological and cultural development, and they will eventually find both the Milky Way and Andromeda. Marcus felt the familiar weight of enormous responsibility settling on his shoulders.
And you think that humans and Zephyrians working together can somehow help you fight these entities?
We think, Observer Kethon said, that your species' combination of emotional commitment and tactical flexibility, combined with Zephyrian wisdom and technological sophistication, represents a form of civilizational evolution that may be uniquely suited to this challenge. Princess Lyra was quiet for a moment, which, based on our analysis of their capabilities, would result in the complete annihilation of all complex life in this galaxy within 50 standard years. The silence that followed this statement was profound. Marcus found himself thinking about all the worlds he had visited, all the beings he had met, all the children who were growing up in the reformed empire that Princess Lyra's courage had helped create. The idea of all of it being consumed by entities whose only purpose was to eliminate complexity was almost too vast to contemplate.
How long do we have to decide? Princess Lyra asked.
The delegation process begins immediately if you agree to participate, the observer replied.
But, the larger preparations will take decades. This is not a decision that requires immediate commitment to action, only commitment to exploration of possibilities. Marcus looked at Princess Lyra, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her expression.
They had spent 2 years learning that the galaxy was full of challenges that seemed impossible until you found the right approach to solving them. This was just another impossible challenge, scaled up to threats that spanned galaxies instead of star systems. Your Majesty, Princess Lyra said, turning to address her grandmother, I believe we should accept this opportunity. The Empire has proven that different species can work together to create something better than any of them could achieve alone. Perhaps it's time to test whether that principle applies to relationships between galaxies as well. The Empress studied her granddaughter for a moment, then smiled with an expression that mixed pride and concern in equal measure. He thought about the reformed empire, with its diverse population working together toward common goals. He thought about his own journey from isolation to partnership, from selfishness to service. Your Majesty, he said, I gave you my word that I would keep Princess Lyra safe. That hasn't changed, regardless of the scale of the threat. Now he was preparing to help protect an entire galaxy from threats that defied comprehension. But, the fundamental principle remained the same: when you gave your word to protect someone, you kept that promise regardless of the scale of the challenge. And, sometimes, if you were very lucky, you discovered that keeping one promise led to opportunities to make promises that mattered even more. Standing beside Princess Lyra, and humans, as the Empress had once observed, had a disturbing tendency to keep their promises even when it defied all logic and self-preservation. Some things, Marcus reflected with satisfaction, never changed. And, in a galaxy facing threats from beyond the edges of known space, that consistency might be exactly what was needed to ensure that everything else could continue to change for the better.